Hi all, welcome to this evening's Clean Coast talk. So people are just starting to kind of still log in. So it'd be great if you have a chance, if you could just introduce yourself in the chat box. We're seeing a wide variety of people who've joined us tonight. So it'd be great if you could just introduce where you're from and yeah, where you're logging in from today. So my name is Richard Curtin and I'm the Clean Coast Officer for the Dublin region. And tonight, my colleague is joining me from down in Kerry, Susan Vickers. So she's the officer for the down in Kerry. And then we're delighted to have Sandra Henry, who is going to give us a talk about the impact of climate change on our heritage sites. And she works for a program called the CHERISH program. And so what we'll do is we'll give it just maybe a minute or two before people kind of get going. And just bear me 1 second there. So I think that's everyone's kind of brought in that. So Susan, I'll get you to keep an eye on the waiting room in case anyone joins in after that. So basically the way it's going to run is I'm going to speak for about 5 minutes, just basically introduce the work of what Clean Coast does, and then just a small kind of chat or a couple of slides on the impact kind of climate change is having on our oceans. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring it over to Sandra, who's going to speak in relation to the impact on coastal heritage, and then we will have Q&A at the end. So what we're going to do also, at the end, yeah, we'll have questions and answers, but if you have questions throughout, you can even throw them in the chat box and then we bring them up at the end of the talk. Otherwise, we will just bring you in at the end. Great, so I'm going to just start sharing my screen. And so the Clean Coast program was established in 2004 and we are operating in the Republic of Ireland. Our main kind of core of our program is engaging with community groups, and we have over 1,000 community groups that are dotted around the coast. These Clean Coast groups, what they do is they kind of adopt different patches of the coastline and they undertake beach cleans. But what we also try to do is build capacity in the community, and they also start getting involved in kind of beach management practices, like examples would be sand dune restoration. The Clean Coast groups come from a disparate background, so it's everything from families to kind of community groups and tidy towns groups to could be club societies or societies and universities and colleges, to sports groups, so like it could be sea kayak groups or sub-aqua groups. So it's kind of a wide family that engage with the program. Clean Coast, our program is also about engagement. So throughout the year, we have a calendar of different events where we engage with the public. So at the start of in January, February, March, we run these Clean Coast roadshows, and what they're kind of like mini kind of community seminars where we kind of numerous different talks in relation to environmental topics. Then we have our 2 call to actions, the big beach, Clean Coast Week at the start of the bathing season, and then at the end of the bathing season, we have the big beach clean. We also have a Love Your Coast competition. This is a photography competition because it's not just about engagement, but it's also about the celebration of our coastlines. And that is a fantastic competition to actually highlight how spectacular the Irish coastline is. And then at the end of the year, we have the Ocean Heroes Award. This is a way of kind of celebrating each year the work of our Clean Coast groups. We have a very kind of popular corporate volunteer program, and this is a fantastic program to kind of, it's not just about getting business groups to kind of be more socially responsible, but it also it's an education aspect to it as well, because anytime we do cleanups, we also try to highlight the environmental benefits of undertaking these cleanups and educating people to reduce their plastic consumption. We run a number of different campaigns. We've 2-minute beach clean and 2-minute street clean is kind of like micro volunteerism. So some people mightn't have the time at the weekend to spend 2 or 3 hours undertaking beach cleans. So that's why we have the 2-minute beach clean, just to kind of highlight even these small steps make an impact. And we run a campaign in conjunction with Irish Water called Think Before You Flush, which is to highlight the issues of sewage related litter. So just in relation to oceans and the important they play, sometimes we don't kind of appreciate that in our everyday lives, oceans play such an important role, especially when it comes to the climate and how they actually regulate our climate. Like when you look at it in a broader context, 71% of the Earth's surface is ocean, and when you go further than that, 91% of the Earth's water is actually contained in our oceans. The oceans generate between 50 and 70% of the oxygen we breathe. Sometimes we highlight, Amazon being the lungs of the world, but we sometimes don't appreciate what the impact oceans play in this, in the creation of oxygen. According to the UN, up to 3 billion people actually rely on the oceans as their primary source of protein. And it was only in 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals were renegotiated, that actually the oceans were actually given their own goal with goal 14, life below water. But it's also the intrinsic value and the cultural value, what kind of oceans play and seas play in our everyday life. Like we all can see the benefits of things like surfing and scuba diving and all that kind of, where kind of leisure activities that people engage in our oceans. But there's also the kind of the cultural aspect, and throughout the ages, the oceans have inspired so many different stories down through the time, but it's also have inspired songs and poetry. And we're also seeing it now in relation to, we're actually highlighting now the actual mental health benefit our oceans play on our lives. So it's been highlighted that not only what nature plays on plays the mental health benefits of that, but also the kind of mental health benefits of things like sea swimming is also having a massive impact now, hence why it's getting very popular. But just to kind of just one of the things I wanted to touch on in this talk was just to highlight the Ipcc special report on oceans and cryosphere and climate change. And this particular report, it came out in 2019, and it's a 700-page document. So what I done is I took a couple of different quotes and kind of findings from the document, and just kind of like briefly going to touch on them now. So one of the quotes what it really stuck out was it said it was virtually certain that the global oceans have warmed unabated since the 1970s, and they have taken more than 90% of the excess heat in climate system. So this just shows you the impact global warming is actually, and climate change is actually playing on our ocean system. But what does all that warming, what impact does that have? So you can see certain species, you can also see this, how it's impacting. So things like seagrass meadows and kelp forests, they're slowly beginning to expanding at high latitudes and contracting at low latitudes since the 1970s. And we can see that in an Irish context, where we can see new species that are appearing off the coast of Ireland, things like golden kelp. But even on a closer to home here in Dublin, seabed marshes, or sorry, seagrass beds near Merrion Gate in Dublin, they play an important food source with brent geese, which are migratory birds that come here. And basically they are under threat due to climate change and due to the increased temperatures that we're experiencing here. We also see the impact climate change is having on our kind of coral reefs. But it's not just the coral reefs that are under threat from ocean acidification. So many other sea lives, seashells and other organisms like barnacles and mussels will experience the same impact due to extreme temperatures and ocean acidification. We're seeing now that coastal communities are under threat with increased extreme weather events. So in an Irish context, in 2017, we experienced Storm Ophelia, which these kind of like strong weather events and kind of extreme weather events are going to become more commonplaces as the kind of climate change increases impact. But there's the the Atlantic Mediterranean overturning circulation. This particular they are also known as AMOC. This plays a vital role in regulating Ireland's temperature because the Nordic current is a part of this. But as this weakens due to climate change, this also has an impact globally as well. So it's predicted that when this actually weakens, this actually impacts rainfall levels in other parts of the world, like in Asia. And due to climate change, there will be also, what it's going to affect is kind of shifts in species distribution. So like, and this will have, so species will move into different kind of coastal regions or different areas, geographic areas. But this has a massive impact in terms of how to regulating fishing as well. And also it will have an impact in the integrity of kind of ecosystems. So these are kind of like big challenges as we face in relation to how climate change will play on kind of even as a food source. But even within the report, it highlighted kind of like with the food security issues as well, with climate change will play, and how that will affect kind of indigenous knowledges and kind of like, you know, the negative impact on traditional diets and food security. But there's also the aesthetic aspect to it again, as I spoke later on. Like this particular image was taken of a basking shark, and then about 2 weeks ago, there's a footage went around Ireland in relation to a number of different sea swimmers came across some basking sharks, and these particular images went viral, and it just shows you how we were connected to these species, these amazing species. And if they were lost due to climate change, it's not just the monetary value as well, but it's the aesthetically and the cultural aspect to it as well. So this was taken by NASA, and it's called the Perpetual Ocean. So it's just kind of like, it was satellite footage. And I just find it so fascinating because it just shows you how kind of, what an interconnected planet we live on, and how the ocean currents are so connected. And that kind of like brings it back to the kind of work that Clean Coast do, is like, although we're Irish based, our work not only has an impact in Ireland, but it also has a global impact because we live on one big interconnected planet. I'd just like to finish on this quote by Sylvia Arab, which always kind of rings true to me. So it's just, no water, no life, no blue, no green. And it just tries to highlight the impact these oceans play and the importance to play in our everyday lives. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to pass it over to Sandra, and then Sandra's going to be our main speaker, and she'll take it from there.
Funded project. It's funded through the Ireland-Wales Programme 2020, and it's a joint nation project between Ireland and Wales. So there's ourselves in the Discovery Programme, who are an archaeological research company, the Geological Survey for Ireland, and the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales, and Aberystwyth University. And we're all working together on CHERISH as a joint nation collaborative project. So CHERISH itself is an acronym. It stands for Climate, Heritage and Environments of Reefs, Islands and Headlands. So what we're hoping to achieve with CHERISH is we're looking at reconstructing past environments and weather histories. We're looking at discovering, assessing, mapping and monitoring heritage on land and beneath the sea. We're looking at targeting data and knowledge gaps to raise awareness of heritage in coastal locations, especially remote locations. And then we're also establishing new metrically accurate baseline data and recording standards. So we're noticing quite a lot of impacts on our coastal heritage due to climate change. So this infographic denotes some of the impacts that are occurring along our coastlines. So for example, warmer global temperatures is denoted here by number 1. And what we're seeing with this is rising sea levels. So rising sea levels are impacting all aspects of heritage, from inundation through to damaging storm events. Number 2 then looks at rises in sea temperatures, and this is leading to warmer seas, which is affecting the chemistry of seawater. For example, increased salinity and also acidity. And also its impact on our marine ecosystems. So this is making our underwater cultural heritage and our foreshore heritage more susceptible to invasive species, which lead to damage of our wreck sites and heritage sites. We're also seeing hotter, drier summers, and this is denoted in the infographic with number 3, and this shows the drying out of cliff faces. So what this leads to is destabilization and collapse, and this affects heritage sites such as promontory forts. Number 4 shows a croc mark, and what we're getting here is drier, warmer weather is making croc marks and parch marks more visible, and therefore we're identifying new heritage sites through the hotter, drier summers. Then number 5 denotes warmer, wetter winters, and what we're seeing happening here is ground is becoming much more saturated, so it's more likely to have increased flood risks, and then also landslides. And then with climate change impacts, we're seeing more extreme weather events, such as storms, and this, for example, is denoted by number 6, which means turbulent seas are causing more scour action around our underwater our underwater cultural heritage sites. And then we're also seeing greater wave action along our coastlines. This is causing erosion and loss at the coast edge. Then we're also seeing structural damage to historic buildings, that's denoted there by number 10. And then if we look at number 9, what we're seeing is the movement of sand and reshaping of dune systems. But this in itself also leads to discovery of new heritage sites. So how the CHERISH project is doing the work that we're doing is by using a fairy toolkit and a number of different methodologies, as we have a number of different specialists in different disciplines. So for example, number 1 denotes LiDAR data, and the Welsh have commissioned a number of LiDAR surveys for some of their more remote islands. Whilst we're also looking at past LiDAR surveys as comparative studies. Number 2 shows unmanned aerial vehicles. So this is drone survey where we're collecting photographic images, both vertical and oblique, and then these images can be processed to produce 3D models and digital elevation models. Number 3 is looking at satellite mapping for the intertidal zone area. Number 4 is aerial photography, and this covers large stretches of coastline and allows us to cover extensive areas within our case study zones in order to collect recognition and monitoring data. Number 5 is geophysical survey. So this type of survey allows us to look below the surface and identify the hidden archaeology that is being impacted by climate change. Number 6 represents paleo-environmental coring, and this basically allows us to look at past environments and past climatic changes occurring in our different study areas. Number 7 is GNSS survey, and this allows us to tie the data that we collect into accurate positioning systems such as national grids and global positioning systems. So number 8 is archaeological recording, and here we can see an archaeologist recording exposed layers on the edge of a cliff face. Number 9 is laser scan survey, and again we're collecting accurate 3D point clouds to represent built heritage sites and cliff faces. Number 10 is excavation, so this is whereby we're undertaking excavation on sites that are at risk of being lost due to climate change, and therefore they're feeding into our understanding and knowledge base of these site types. Number 11 is seafloor mapping. So this allows us to create maps of the sea floor And number 12 is underwater archaeology, whereby we're monitoring wreck sites underwater to understand how they are being impacted as well by climate change. So in Ireland, we're working in 5 different case study areas. We're located in North Dublin, and we're working on the east coast of Wexford. We're also on the southeast of Wexford. We're working in Waterford, along a stretch of coastline that ranges from Tramore to Dungarvan. And in County Kerry, we're working on both the Dingle and Iveragh peninsulas, particularly on the western extremities of the 2 peninsulas. So one of the sites I'm going to discuss today is coastal promontory forts, and there's 573 promontory forts located and recorded in the Sites and Monuments Record in Ireland. And out of these 573 sites that have been identified, 508 of these are coastally located promontory forts. So what we normally find with promontory forts, which makes them quite identifiable, is that the neck of the promontory fort has been anthropogenically adapted with structures such as ditches and ramparts, which separate the promontory from the hinterland behind. So promontory forts are typically associated with the Iron Age, but in Ireland we see much evidence for continued reuse of the promontory forts well into the medieval period. So if we look at County Waterford, the dots on the map denote some of the promontory forts located in this small section of coastline. As you can see, they're quite densely located. This high concentration illustrates to us the importance of promontory forts in Irish society, trade and economy. Therefore, it's very important for us to study these site types in order to be able to learn more about these different elements of society in the Iron Age and later periods. Then we see in the photographs along the bottom some of the identifiable features of promontory forts, such as the ditches and the banks, but we also see the huge levels of erosion and loss of sediment that is occurring a lot at these sites. So if we go to County Wexford and we look at Great Salty Island, we can see that along the southeast coast of the island, what we have is a hard coastline, but the rest of the island we have these softer sediments. And if we look at the northern tip of the island, we can see that there's a promontory fort located. Here we have a 3D model of the site that's been collected via laser scan data. And if we look at the photo on the left with the ranging rod, we can see the exposure of archaeological layers. So you can see the dark sediment denotes the ditch of the promontory fort, and we can see with the continued erosion on Great Salty Island, we're also losing our archaeological sites here, and they're being heavily impacted by sea action. So another promontory fort we're working on is Ferreter's Castle and Promontory Fort, and this is located in County Kerry. It's on the Dingle Peninsula, and it's located on the Ballyferreter headland. So this site actually is located right beside Ferreter's Cove, which is a Mesolithic Neolithic transition period site. Ferreter's headland itself extends over 500 metres. It has 2 separate necks of land. So you can see on the geological map of the promontory fort that you have 2 natural necks of land that have been caused due to erosion of softer sediments against the harder lava beds along this stretch of promontory fort. And what then we've seen happen is that both of these necks have been adapted by humans to create 2 very distinctive regions within promontory forts. So we have ditches and ramparts that is the construction methods used here. So with Ferreter's promontory fort, we see the later addition of the castle, and this is 15th or 16th century in date, and it itself has been negatively impacted by storms in the 19th century. As you can see from the laser scan image of the castle here, there's only 2 upstanding walls remaining. So what we're going to do at Furter's Promontory Fort, we're going to undertake some excavation. So this will give us an insight into promontory forts in Ireland in general. They should help inform us about their usage, their character, and then they'll also give us insights into the promontory forts in County Kerry, and also particularly we look at the different archaeological site types present within this promontory fort, and we'll hopefully be able to undertake some investigations of the hut sites located. You can see a photograph here of some of the more prominent hut sites in the promontory fort, and below our digital elevation model shows the different hut sites. They're located along the edge of the promontory fort and that are currently being eroded and lost due to cliff collapse along this headland. So Doonbeg is actually another promontory fort in County Kerry. It's located on the Dingle Peninsula, and here we just have a little look at Doonbeg Fort and the different features inside. So number 1 represents the Clochen, and this would be later medieval in date, dated to the 10th or 11th century. Number 2 is the stone rampart. So this stone rampart has been heavily impacted by erosion, and number 3 represents the entranceway to stone rampart, which we see now sits along the edge of the cliff. This actually at one point in time would have been centrally located. Number 4 and number 6 represent the banks of the promontory fort, whilst number 5 it represents the entranceway. And underneath this entranceway, we also have a souterrain, which is also being heavily impacted by loss along this cliff face. So Doonbeg was recorded extensively with antiquarian plans. If we look at some of the earliest plans of the site from 1841, we can see that the site is represented as a triangular headland. As you can see, the rampart and the entranceway appear pretty much centrally located. Sorry. So then if we look at some later plans of the site, we see again that quite a large extent of the site is visible, with a lot of the rampart walls still intact. We do see some evidence of erosion, for example, on Westrock's 1910 plan. We can see that the dashed line represents loss of the site that previously was there. And actually, these, if we see in our 1910 plan how we see it differ from Dunoir's earlier plan of the site, is that there's 2 additional side rampart walls. These were actually added on by the OPW during repair works at the turn of the 20th century. So that's why the earlier plans of the site showed a straight rampart, and the later plans showed the inturning of the rampart towards the sea, and this was actually due to reconstruction work by the OPW. But we can also see that between the work undertaken by the OPW and Westrock's plan of the site, there's actually been collapse and loss of land. The site itself was excavated in the 1970s by Terry Barry of Trinity College, and this excavated due to the awareness of erosion and the impacts that were happening here at Doonbeg, and how the site was at a high potential of being lost in the future. However, the most recent collapse, or the most major collapse to have occurred since the excavation in 1977, occurred in 2014. So at this point in time, the National Monument Service and OPW worked together to undertake to undertake repair work on the site. But then in 2017, Storm Ophelia, which had huge impacts all around the Irish coastline, caused quite a lot of damage to Doonbeg. This was actually due to a number of reasons. So part of the impact was from the drainage system and inland flooding. So what happened was when water movement from Mount Eagle, that's located in the hinterland of Doonbeg, it basically gorged out an entrance into the fort. Here we can see it represented by the photos on the left, and you can see how the sediments have literally been ripped up, and there's been a huge exposure of archaeological layers. And then with Storm Eleanor in 2018, we see this continued and further cliff collapse. So like a rotten tooth, once we're starting to get this erosion, we're continuing to see this ongoing erosion and this continual cycle of it just being impacted as the sites become more and more destabilized. So here's just a number of 3D models we've collected of the site. Now these show models from 2017 and 2018, but we have continued to work on the site and continue to collect plans and 3D models of the site throughout 2019 and also the later half of 2018 as the site continues to encounter loss. So if we look here at one of the earlier plans, McAllister's plan of the site from the end of the 19th century, we can see he's already recording loss, like we noted on Westrope's plan from 1910. We can see the interning of the wall has been lost at this point, and actually McAllister being to the site beforehand, he was able to observationally record the loss of parts of the site due to erosion. And then our model from 2017 basically creates a plan of the site at that point in time, as is our model from 2018. So then if we take the coastal stretch and digitize it from each of these 3 plans, what we see is the amount of loss that has occurred. And as you can see, it's been incredibly substantial. We've lost over maybe half of the Rampart wall, and much further back, if we continue back into the ditches and the banks, especially in that 2017 area, we're seeing much more negative impacts further back into the coastline. So with this, we've been able to compare the 2 3D models and to try to understand the quantities of loss that are occurring on sites such as Doonbeg. So here, for example, we can see that there's been a loss of, if we go from number 2 to 6, we see that a length of over 23.68 meters have been lost. We see, if we look at 3 to 4, that we've lost nearly 11 meters in this period of time. In this 1-year cycle, we've lost huge sections of the site. And when the volume of loss was worked out, it was estimated at a minimum of 3,000 cubic meters of sediment and soil. So another site we're working on is Ballinskelligs Bay in County Kerry. So here we've a number of different surveys have been undertaken, a number of different methodologies have been employed, from laser scan through to targeted UFE, due to wider landscape, intertidal and shallow water UFE, and paleo-environmental coring. And this has all been complemented with walkover survey. So this map, for example, denotes the different coring locations around the bay. As you can see, we have quite a lot of coring sites to the north of the bay, but we also there's coring undertaken on the west-hand side of the bay as well. We have Ballinskelligs Priory and Castle, and they're both been impacted heavily by erosion. The abbey itself would have been founded around 1210, and we know it's disbanded by 1578. And the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Skellig Michael sits off the Ballinskellig's coastline, and we know that that the monastery on Skellig moved to Ballinskellig due to various hazards on the rock. Then also we have other important ecclesiastical sites such as Kilree located around the bay here, and we have a number of other cultural heritage sites such as ancient hamlets with quite a pamphlet landscape. Here, the orange area that denotes the Geological Survey of Ireland's UFE data set that they've collected. So that's 8 to 10 kilometres of coastal data collected by the GSI. So here, if we look at this, what we can see is the data they've collected overlaid on a Google Earth image, and then the image on the left hand side actually is the processing of the data and the digital elevation model, where you're seeing the intertidal zone and the shallow water zone depicted in 3D. So with some of the paleo-environmental investigations around Ballinskellig, we began to get some of our date backs. So for example, at Strand, coring was undertaken at the low water mark to basically to investigate the buried peats in this area. We can see here back at the coastline that there's an exposure of peats, and in front of this image that shows the peat face, we have tree stumps, and what we have along this bay is tree stumps. So one of these tree stumps was actually dated by the team in Aberystwyth University, and they returned a date in the Bronze Age. So what we now know is that there was a forest located here in the Bronze Age in Ballinskellig's Bay. At the low water mark, there's evidence of continued buried peats, and what is quite likely is that the forest extended quite a lot further into the bay than what we call the low tide, the low water mark today. So from the different areas we've worked in, we were up in the Imola Peats, and this is located in behind Strand, and then over in Ballyukel, and that's over on the west of the bay, to the northwest of the bay, over past the Priory. And we're getting quite a range of dates for the formation of the peats in this area. So we're looking at about 6.5 thousand years ago to about 4,000 years ago. Dates have been coming back, or before present, sorry, not years ago. So so it's probably about 6.5 thousand to about 4,000 before present is the kind of range in dates we're getting for the formation of the peats. And these peats, as they continue to be studied, will hopefully give us much more insight into the past environment and climate events that are occurring in Ballinskellig. So another site I'm going to talk about, again in County Kerry, this time on the Evora Peninsula, like Ballinskellig, is the Sunbeam. It's a coastal trading schooner. It basically was lost, actually, it said, due to strong storm events, and it has been located along the beach here in Ross Bay, known to many locals. It has quite large local significance. It's seen as a landmark along the beach. It often was used as a point for people to walk as far as, you know, it's the subject of photography and just other interactions for the local community. So in the winter of 2013 to 2014, what you had was severe storm events again, and what ended up happening was that the wreck site, which had been buried and stabilized in sediments, was actually ripped up and pushed back against the dune system. So here you can see both an image of the wreck before the storm events and after storm events. So the Underwater Archaeology Unit commissioned Laird Dunn to undertake coastal defence works, recovery and conservation of over 50 ship timbers. So Lars began to undertake the conservation work, but the storms continued throughout 2014, and further storms continued to negatively impact the wreck site. So ultimately what ended up happening was the wreck was recorded as it was, but it was also reburied and stabilised. So when we came to record the site in July 2017, we were able to collect a photogrammetric model of the buried wreck site here. So this gives us a 3D point cloud and record of the site, or at least both sides of the hull of the vessel. We continue to undertake monitoring surveys of the Sunbeam in 2017, visiting it in September, and then we visited it again in June 2018. When we visited the site in June 2018, we actually weren't able to identify it. So what we ended up doing was, I suppose we assumed that maybe the site had become reburied and stabilised over the past winter. But we decided to continue our monitoring visits, see if we could identify the site or to understand the condition of it and how it was changing. So in October 2018, we undertook another monitoring visit to the site, and at this point in time we decided to walk the extent of Ross Bay Spit, just to see if we could identify anything of interest, anything that was changing along the spit here. So what we have on the left hand side is just a map that denotes the first position that the Sunbeam was located in prior to the storms of 2013 to 2014. And this is the star, I don't know if my mic shows it, that represents this. Then the movement of the shipwreck in the initial period of storms of 2013 to 2018 is denoted here, so that's over 180 metres. What we ended up identifying in our visit in October, which was not something we expected, was that the shipwreck was actually very much exposed, but it was in a completely different location at the northern tip of the spit. And this star here denotes that location of the wreck site. So what we see if we go from the last known location until the newly identified location is 2.5 kilometres if you go as the crow flies, but if you continue around the coastline, you're looking at probably over a distance of 3 kilometres of movement for a direct site. So what we've seen here is an extensive physical impact on our wreck. We're unsure whether it was a number of events that led to the relocation of the wreck, or if it was a singular event that has led to the location of the wreck. We have since revisited the wreck site as the location. It remains there, and we aim to continue to record the wreck site and have our comparative data sets to see how the hull of the site has changed from the initial work that's been undertaken on the wreck back using Lars data from 2014 and ours from 2017. So that's everything from the project. If you have any interest in anything, please feel free to follow us on any of our social media accounts or get in touch with us. Thanks.
Firstly, I'd like to thanks very interesting, fascinating presentation. Sarah, do you have a question? Is it?
No, I was just clapping.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Can I ask a question? And I'm really mindful of like some of the I just was looking through some of the people on the call, and there's some really interesting projects that people are working on. Sandra, was the rate of erosion much greater than you thought it would be from the onset of the project?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is What's having the great impact is storm events. So on a number of sites we were working on, we're collecting baseline and monitoring data, and there is continual erosion. When we under comparative studies between 1 or 2 years of data, we might not be seeing large impact. With a site like Doonbeg, you're seeing substantial loss, or Sunbeam, you're seeing substantial impacts due to singular events.
So do you feel there's a bit of a race against time to, like, you know, has the speed of the loss of artifacts and the loss of evidence, I suppose, you know, are you feeling now that it's more urgent, your work is more urgent now than you would have thought at the beginning? I think Sandra's frozen.
It looks like
I'm
Sandra's...
sure she'll come back. I'm sure she'll come back, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, there's an awful lot of expertise on this call. Would anybody else have anything to say about that?
Hi, I'm not an expert, but I do live on a coastal area in the northwest, and there is a huge amount of beach erosion in the locality, which to my untrained eye seems to be exacerbated by the placement of massive boulder barriers by a local golf club in an effort to protect a golf club, which seems to be driving the wave force further up the beach. And I'm just wondering if there's a national policy on allowing natural erosion and movement of sand beaches to occur, and whether golf clubs or any other sort of property that's privately or publicly owned, you know, whether it's a good idea for them to try and maintain their bit, maybe at the cost of something else further up the line.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Maeve, can I ask, Sandra, are you back with us? Did you hear anything?
Yeah, I actually just got cut off the last question. So, yeah, I made.
So basically, I was just asking you, was the rate of erosion much quicker than you expected? And do you feel there's the urgency of your work now? Do you feel that more than you would have thought you would have? And Maeve was just asking, there she is up in the southwest of the country. She was talking about witnessing erosion there, and also the impacts of hard measures such as, I presume it's rock armour that a local golf course has put in to save their bit of land. And of course that has an impact further on the coast. So really, you know, the question was about national, you know, kind of, I suppose there's, and I'm hesitating because that is an issue. It's an issue around the coastline. I mean, more and more local authorities want only soft measures. If the national parks are involved, they will absolutely say that there's no hard measures allowed, but that is happening. So I don't know if I phrased that question enough for you, Maeve. If not, let us know. But what's your thoughts on that, Sandra?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the impact of hard defences, and some of the sites themselves are protected by hard defences. I guess what you do see is it impacts either side typically of the defence itself. So say for example, if you look at Ballinskelligs Bay, so you have the Priory site, but next to the Priory site is the ancient hamlet. So actually the erosion that's been caused by the seawall is actually eating into the site, or eating in towards the site of the ancient hamlet. So I think, yeah, there's been a major movement away from hard defences in recent years, trying to prevent negative impacts further along the coastline. So that's definitely something you'd see. And I think to just kind of go back to your question, I think there's such a huge quantity of archaeology around the Irish coastline, and we've such an extensive coastline. Obviously, CHERISH is working within a certain zone of funding, and only when certain case study areas within these zones of funding. So, yeah, there's a huge room for much more work to be done along the coastline, recording our heritage, and before it is lost and before you have hugely negative impacts. And also I think it's kind of important each site is viewed for its own, on its own, and basically it's that challenge. When do you manage loss and when do you conserve the site?
And do you, like, I mean, look, you know, if you were talking to somebody else, you know, a coastal botanist about, you know, they're, you know, or somebody who had an interest in that, they may feel that a special area conservation may need to be protected. And, you know, then if you're going to take the really hard line, you should just let nature take its course, would be another train of thought. What's your opinion on that? I mean, you're trying to study something as quickly as you can with, look, in the reality of life, a limited budget, I'm sure, and constraints. So how do you feel about that? And that's a really kind of nasty question to ask you, but would you, if you had your way, rock armor the whole thing off and try and document as much as you could?
I think to see get to that place with cultural heritage, because of the quantity of cultural heritage on the coastline, and what's now on the coastline that wasn't on the coastline when it was built, you know, what you I suppose the record is one of the most important things, to record the sites, to get what information we can get from the sites, to let it feed into our understandings of past society, economic activity, you know, understandings of past climate, people's adaptation to past climate impacts. So I think that's really it. I think it's impractical to try to rock armor the entire coastline. But I think that if we create records and if we get as much understanding and knowledge out of these sites as we can, you know, at least that's perhaps a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Perfect. There was just another question there in relation to ocean carbon cycle, and is there any carbon offsetting programs in relation to marine forests like kelp in Ireland? I'm not aware of any. Are you aware of any, Susan? I don't think there's any.
No.
The only like any kind of majority of kelp we have in Ireland and stuff like that would be natural kelp, and that I haven't come across of any projects that are actually growing it. You're offhand, you don't know, Susan, do you? Or
I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Now that, you know, that doesn't mean that we that doesn't mean that there may not be, but
yeah,
but not to my knowledge, no. Just to come back to you, Maeve, before we wrap that up. I don't know if that golf course got permission to put in that rock armor. Some places they took action without looking for permission. Look, anyone who was looking at the Trump, what is it, the Doonbeck golf course, that was declined permission to put in hard measures there a few months ago. So, you know, I think more and more, you know, particularly the local authority stance on most of these hard measures is to you know, not support them. So,
sorry, can I just go and ask a question, please?
of course, yeah.
Hi, sorry. Sandra, hi, it's Crona here. I'm over in North Wales. I know some of your colleagues down at Aberystwyth University.
Very good.
Just a question about data management.
Yeah.
It's a bit dull. I love, you've got a huge amount of stuff going on with CHERISH. Lots of data, point clouds for a start. I mean, how you store that kind of data. And I just wanted to ask you, you know, in general, how are you managing all that? And what are your plans for longer term access for people to that data post CHERISH? Thanks.
So all the data we collect in CHERISH is open source. So everything is available to people. You know, more than happy to see people use our data. I think the more people do, the greater impact it has, you know, absolutely. So yeah, we're putting all of the data into the digital repositories of each of the countries. And so we're archiving all of the data, and it will be accessible to people as well through the appropriate repositories as well as in-house.
Thanks.
I have a question. We have a question from Dee and she's asking, is the rate of erosion on islands the same as on the mainland?
Do you know, it varies, so it does, from what we have seen, but we haven't done any extensive studies in comparative studies. But what we're seeing is it depends on the type of coastline, it depends on the type of hydrodynamics are at play, wind and marine zone in the area, and also kind of what also is where it's located. You know, you're seeing much heavier impacts in certain areas, say in comparison to other parts of the country, and it's not something that we've readily said, you know, that islands are being more heavily impacted. Now, obviously, a lot of islands are in more remote locations offshore. They're maybe more open to some of the climate change impacts that we're seeing and more likely to be negatively impacted. But we haven't noticed much difference between the types of landmass, if that makes any.
Yeah, what I'm actually thinking of is Dunangus on Inishmore. That's relatively, you know, there hasn't been too much erosion there really. Whereas if you look at Lahinch, where they've put in a lot of defences and they've built car parks right up on the actual coastline, that maybe the infrastructure that's put in place might actually be more of a cause of erosion than somewhere where it's actually left, like the Dunangus site.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah, to consider maybe how the anthropogenic adaptations of the landscape maybe are you know, negatively affecting loss of land or impacts. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Perfect. So guys, does anyone else have a question?
I do. Can I ask a question?
Of course, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sara. I'm a PhD student in archaeology at Harvard University. And I would like to ask you if you, because I see you use a lot of different techniques, especially for survey, for remote sensing. So I was wondering if you have or planning to have like a training sort of program, or if you are oriented and interested in training programs. So like if you're offering for students techniques or.
So we try to do a lot of different training programs, because a big component of the CHERISH project for us is outreach, and I suppose it's one of the things we consider really important as part of the project. So we do training programs. So if you have any interest in them, the CHERISH Facebook page and website usually advertise them. Last year we did an aerial flying school here in Ireland where we taught UAV methods and fixed wing plane aerial photography methods as well. And we teach, sometimes we do underwater archaeology training courses with local diver communities. We tie in quite closely with the Irish Underwater Council. And we also actually have a connection to FPAN in America, the Florida Protection. So for their HMS monitoring scout programs, we're hoping to do a cross-nation training collaboration, transfer skills more or less. So we do tend to do workshops and training schools. Yes, yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Great. Anyone else has any other questions?
I suppose that's just another question that just came into me directly about, and it's I suppose it's extending Sarah's question, but you mentioned looking for people to help out in a dig in Kerry. So you would train those people beforehand, or would you look for a certain amount of skill before allowing?
No, you wouldn't need any skill set beforehand, and we'll only be able to take a certain number of people on board, because what we'd hope to do is to have a trained archaeologist working with you so that you could learn skills, whether they're geophysical skills or archaeological excavation skills, for the period of time you're at the excavation.
So the whole citizen science part is really important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I think, you know, when we took, it was mentioned earlier about the amount of heritage on the coastline. I think it is on people and local communities to identify and give notice to the authorities like National Monument Service or National Museum if they start identifying heritage along the coastline that is at risk of being lost or damaged due to climate change. Okay. Or maybe even exposed due to it.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, Sandra. Just there was one of your slides that showed all the different angles and different kind of data you were picking up, like GIS mapping and other aspects to it. Because I found it fascinating because it's so multidisciplined. Like, but like, would all the people who work in this particular project like would go specialized in just say GIS, but have a background in archaeology, or what way would it?
So what we have is a few different specialists. So we have archaeological surveyors, archaeologists, underwater archaeologists, aerial archaeologists, and we have actually surveyors as well. We have geologists, we have marine surveyors, we have paleo and environmentalists, and we have luminescence experts. And so it's quite a wide variety of disciplines, but we're all kind of, I suppose, there's kind of, I suppose, a wide enough range of skills to be able to maybe use such a variety of technologies and toolkits, because, yeah.
Cool, yeah, it's very fascinating. Cool, any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so we might actually...
Richard's frozen now.
Yeah, thanks a million for coming out today, and yeah, it was a fantastic presentation. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye.
Take care.